There's one question I receive fairly often about Jesus, which I've never made a response video to. And that is, Aaron, do you think that Jesus had an awakened Kundalini? And so I'm going to cut right to the chase by saying, yes, without question, Jesus had a fully awakened Kundalini. But why I'm so certain of this fact is the more important question, which I'll be explaining in today's video. The gospel accounts of Yeshua are clear and present evidence of this fact, that Jesus had a fully activated green ray energy center, which shows that such a person is now operating from the fourth density of consciousness, rather than only the third, as with most of humanity. Jesus wears all the hallmarks of a fourth density being in the Gospels, or in other words, somebody with a fully awakened Kundalini. So today I'm going to show you why this term or phenomenon, Kundalini, is so important and what it really means. Because growing up as a Christian, I'd only ever heard this word used a few times, but it was always used to connotate some sort of demonic meaning. And it was always connected to, serpents and devils, and was always something that was thought of as obviously evil. I actually still see Christians commenting on my Kundalini videos today, telling me that Kundalini is demonic and evil, Aaron, don't you know? Even though they've never experienced it, and I have. You can probably browse through the comment section of this very video and find such comments. Because Christians notoriously demonize anything they don't understand as evil or New Age or demonic. And so what I want to do today is to explain to the skeptic, whether atheist or Christian or otherwise, what a Kundalini awakening really is, why it happens, and what it all means. And then we'll have a better framework to understand why Yeshua was clearly awakened in this regard. So let's get into it. I'm Aaron Abke, and this is Mystical Jesus, episode 18. So what exactly is a Kundalini awakening? Because if it's real at all, then it must be something objective that can be seen and measured with specific types of symptomology, with a degree of consistency across time periods and cultures and so forth. And that is exactly what we find when we study the literature on Kundalini. Many Eastern cultures, most especially the Taoists and the Hindu yogis, have a very detailed science of Kundalini, both the metaphysics and the biology. And in more recent times, there have also been modern scientists and philosophers who have studied it extensively as well, such as Gopi Krishna and Hannah Dixon. And what studying all these different texts and traditions has shown me is that Kundalini is a neurobiological event that takes place when a certain level of spiritual development has happened. And this was strongly confirmed when I experienced it for myself. So I'm going to share with you today in great detail my own personal experience, in case there's still any skeptics that remain unconvinced that this is an absolutely real biological phenomenon that millions of people have experienced and are experiencing today. It's my personal opinion that Kundalini awakenings are massively on the rise on our planet in an unprecedented way, so it's only going to get more common as time progresses. So in late 2020, I began experiencing some very bizarre symptoms that I couldn't really explain. The first and most prominent symptom that I experienced during my Kundalini awakening, which also was the one that lasted the longest, is something that I came to call volcano veins. Because all through the meridians of my arms and hands and legs and feet especially, and sometimes even along my spine, there would be this kind of searing hot energy felt. Not quite like an electrical current, but more like a glowing type of heat, much like a red frying pan glows when it's heated up on the stove. This heat was not necessarily painful, but it was very intense and very distracting. And this sensation would begin occurring in my body anytime that I would sit still or lay down for more than about 1 minute. It was very subtle at first, and for a few weeks it was almost unnoticeable. But then it began to grow in intensity, and after several months of this sensation, I was at the point where I could no longer even sleep at night because I would wake up with all of my limbs on fire, and I'd have to get up and walk around my house and do push-ups and squats and things to calm the energy down, because movement was the only thing I figured out could diminish this energy and allow me to hopefully go back to sleep again. And so that's what taught me that there was some kind of change occurring in my nervous system. Now, it wasn't until I read from the Law of One material on Kundalini that I really began to understand the metaphysics of this whole crazy phenomenon. What is really going on when we experience this effect? Now, understanding the densities model and the process of progressive evolution, it's clear that there is a vibrational gap, if you will, that one crosses over as their consciousness passes out of the third density frequency range and into the fourth density range. Sort of like moving slowly from the color yellow towards the color green on a color wheel. Eventually, the color becomes more green than it is yellow, and that is where the Kundalini awakening is set off. Because while our consciousness can ascend far beyond the limits of the third density range, our physical body cannot without an upgrade of some sort. We all possess a third density body with a third density nervous system. And this is the main reason why experiencing fourth density states like bliss and ecstasy and oneness with God are so fleeting. The fourth density is represented in miniature in our fourth chakra, the green ray energy center or heart chakra. And this is the energy center that allows for things like bliss and joy and ecstasy and empathy and humility and kindness, service to others, forgiveness, compassion. These energies are not available in third density. The ego does not possess any of these functions. And so if we want to assimilate these states of being permanently into our consciousness, we must rise above the level of ego, or third density consciousness, in order to receive them. And so this happens spontaneously on very rare occasions. Sometimes we sort of slip into these fourth density states while we're out in nature, or traveling abroad, or on a plant medicine for sure, or even deep in prayer and meditation. It's as if all of a sudden we experience a whole new perception of reality, where it is clear that all is one. Only God exists, and therefore love is the highest truth in the universe. These things are obvious and childlike to us in the fourth density state, and these new perceptions feel dazzling and blissful at first. But then, after a few short minutes, or sometimes hours, or maybe days at best, we come crashing back down to our default third density level of consciousness. And that's because these fourth density states sort of max out the RPMs on our third density engine or nervous system. A third density nervous system just can't sustain these higher states of energy for very long before the engine begins to blow out. And so in order to sustain fourth density states, our nervous system needs to be upgraded. And that, my friends, is what Kundalini awakening is. It is a neurobiological upgrade of our nervous system from a third to a fourth density frequency. So it's not something that's visibly apparent with the naked eye. It's an internal transformation that we can feel and sense very palpably. We are able to hold more love, more light, more peace, more stillness. And only after our nervous system has been primed to handle these states can we actually retain them on a permanent basis. And so this refining process is usually not easy or pleasant, because it's basically just a purging out of all the third density energies trapped in our nervous system. All of our fears, our attachments, our victimhood, our traumas, it all comes raging to the surface as Kundalini begins to turn up the heat in our nervous system. And so the ego is being burnt out to make room for a higher level of awareness to begin taking over. All of our shadows have to be seen and healed by that fourth density energy. And this process can take years or even over a decade in some cases, depending on how much we help or hinder the process. But usually, a Kundalini ascension is set off by an event which I call the inner conjunction. This is the classic lightning bolt experience that people describe, which is what Christians especially see as being demonic most of the time. The most common characteristic of an inner conjunction that people describe is a feeling like you have a giant bolt of lightning shooting up your spine, or a fire hose connected to the base of your spine and just blasting at full strength. And this is what causes the famous Kundalini position, where people will arch their spines and have their eyes roll to the back of their head, because they have an unfathomable amount of energy blasting through their spine. And so the spinal vertebrae want to lock together in the most anatomically aligned position to allow this energy through. So on one hand, I understand completely why some Christians seeing this would assume that some sort of demonic possession event is taking place. But when you ask anyone who's had this experience, they won't tell you that it was evil or demonic. They'll tell you that it was one of the most divine and blissful experiences of their life, probably the most in many cases. People have astounding mystical experiences with the divine that positively change their life forever. And it's only after this event is over that the shadows slowly begin to surface so that they can be healed. But if someone doesn't know this, that this is why they're having this event and why their shadows are emerging, or what to do about it, they can become very psychologically disoriented. And disorientation is one of the most classic Kundalini symptoms. And so this is why we hear both very positive and very negative things about Kundalini awakenings. It all depends on how it is managed after the inner conjunction takes place. And this is exactly what happened to me one night after I went to bed with a strange restless leg syndrome. I had done something unique that night in terms of my spiritual practice. Normally I was doing 10 minutes of japa mantra chanting, but that night I felt a unique kind of charge happening in my body, which was really enjoyable. And so I did 2 more rounds of japa chanting for a total of 30 minutes. And then I went downstairs to sit on the couch and started to have this really intense restless leg syndrome. So I went to bed like this, and I awoke a few hours later to the sound of my head being inside of a jet engine or something. And I was looking down a long tunnel of light. And to my shock, the image of the goddess Shakti appeared inside of this tunnel of light, exactly in her Hindu form, with the dark blue skin, 6 arms, jewelry, piercing glowing eyes. And we had a sort of telepathic conversation where she told me that she needed to upgrade my nervous system in my body to intake more light energy so that she could come and dwell in my body. And so I asked her if that's what this whole experience was, or if she was going to upgrade my body over an extended period of time after this. And she responded simply, "Think of it as your commencement ceremony." And then she told me that she loved me and that I was her child and she was my divine mother. And then all of a sudden I was just sort of sucked out of this tunnel of light back into my body, which was writhing and contorting on my bed as I laid face down. And then, as it's classically reported, I felt this enormous energy moving back down the spine as the pressure began to relax, like a fire hydrant slowly being turned off. And once the energy made it down to the base of my spine, my whole body became extremely cold, as if cold from the inside out. And I realized sort of intuitively that Kundalini had burnt up all of the chi in my body, or the prana in my body. And so I naturally started doing some kind of deep breath work as I laid there. And I did this for about an hour before I got the warmth back into my body and eventually fell asleep again. Now, this was obviously one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever had, second only to my first spiritual awakening in 2017. But it was life-changing because more so that it altered my perception in a permanent way. It was as if from that moment on, I was on like a tiny dose of MDMA or something. There's just this new kind of warm feeling in my heart that feels like goodwill toward all beings and a recognition of the spiritual value of all life. There's more beauty, more joy, more love, more humility in my awareness. And of course, I proceeded to move through several die-offs in the following years that were not easy to move through, but nonetheless, this expanded feeling of love in my heart has still only continued to grow to this day, as my heart chakra is continuing to come more online. And so there's this kind of effortless awareness of love in every moment when we begin to enter fourth density consciousness, We don't have to work for it so much, but it's right there, obvious, forward-facing in everyone we meet. We couldn't unsee this divine love, even if we wanted to. It would haunt us if we tried to run away from it. And so we know just to embrace it, despite some of the ego's resistance. And so this is another common experience reported about Kundalini awakenings that I've come to call heart field expansion. The Green Ray Energy Center gets significantly charged from this event, the interconjunction. And as it continues to polarize more, all of our distortions and shadows start to get burnt out of the system, because love and fear cannot coexist. And so the greater the presence of love is felt within us, demands that these old energies be seen and healed by that love. So this is one of the hallmarks of love, is that it is naturally healing and restoring to everything it touches. Healing is a natural byproduct of love, but healing doesn't always feel great. Sometimes it feels like a headache, or vomiting, or a sinus infection, or chills, or fever, and so forth. But this is how we expel toxins. This is how we transmute our darkness and shadows. We let it all come up to be seen and felt, and we accept it and we forgive it. And after you go through this interconjunction, this healing process is inevitable and unavoidable. Kundalini cuts us no more slack in hiding from our traumas once she awakens. And so to sum all of this up, what a Kundalini awakening really is a neurobiological response to the activation of the fourth energy center, the heart chakra. Every human being is born with the lower three chakras in full activation, the lower triad of red, orange, and yellow ray centers. And this is what comprises the human ego, these bottom three chakras. Animals, for example, only have the first two chakras in full activation and are trying to turn on the third. What makes us different from animals, psychologically speaking, is that we have the third energy center, the yellow ray, online in our nervous system, which animals do not. And so we as humans are in a unique position where we can actually intentionally awaken and activate the fourth energy center of the heart chakra, and thus become a 4 active center being. And that is what the term fourth density consciousness really means. So Kundalini is quite literally our green ray energy, or fourth density energy, awakening within the nervous system. So hopefully now you can see why I'm quite sure that Jesus had already been through this process himself, and perhaps might have even been born with an awakened Kundalini, or green ray energy center. In the Law of One, this is called the dual activated body, when somebody is born with a fully active yellow ray body and green ray body from birth, which is very, very rare. But there is no question, regardless of that fact, that Yeshua was operating on a far higher plane of awareness than the rest of the people of his world. Yeshua even rebuked and chastised them for not being aware of their oneness with all other beings. So maybe now you can see why I'm quite sure that Jesus had already been through this process himself, or perhaps might have even been born with an awakened Kundalini, or green ray energy center. Yeshua consistently taught that loving God with all your heart and loving your neighbor as yourself was the greatest commandment of all, and that this commandment fulfills all other commandments. So Yeshua was obviously speaking with a fully activated heart chakra. Otherwise, he would not have been able to perform the healing miracles that he was notorious for. Because true healing and demonstration requires first to have a significant amount of love for the person that you're attempting to help heal. You must see the sick person before you as God sees them in heaven, perfect, whole, and healthy, and to command this reality to become made manifest through the love that you feel for them. So nobody whose heart chakra is closed could manage such a feat. And I don't think anyone would argue that Jesus' heart was not completely open. And no one can have a fully opened heart chakra without having undergone a Kundalini awakening. Because again, a Kundalini awakening literally is the process of the green ray energy center turning online in the whole nervous system. Not just temporarily, not just during fleeting moments of spiritual ecstasy, but permanently at all times. This requires nervous system integration. This is why I believe that Kundalini awakening must be taken seriously. It's not just some cool weekend novelty at a retreat where you can go and do a bunch of breath work and have your Kundalini blasted off and then go home and have some spiritual bragging points for your friends. Kundalini is not some cool validation of your spiritual growth. These are dangerous ways of approaching Kundalini because, yes, the inner conjunction can be incredible and it can be very much a highlight of one's life, but what can follow that can be just as much a negative experience in terms of the pain, the suffering, the shadows that it brings up and provokes within you. So we have to know what we're getting ourselves in for. And it's my personal opinion that it's not helpful or responsible to just teach people how to blast their Kundalinis open at a retreat and then send them home discombobulated and totally unprepared for the dark night of the soul they're likely going to experience. Kundalini awakening is an inside-out transformation, biological, mental, and spiritual. It is the integration of divine love into one's entire being and perception, such that you become viscerally aware of the sacredness of life and the connection you have to all of life. And this causes a great deal of sensitivity to be felt in ways that can be overwhelming at first. And so these are all things that people need to be prepared for so they know what to expect. There's a lot we can do right to accelerate this process in a beneficial way. But there's also a lot we can do wrong to slow down this process and make it exponentially more difficult on ourselves. And I've seen this time and time again. If we don't know how to process what comes up during a Kundalini awakening, how to self-pace or manage the energy when it gets too intense, how to balance what we're feeling in our body, we can run into significant problems, both physical and spiritual. And so that's why I created my third program in 4D University, which is called Fourth Density Ascension Protocol, or 4DAP for short. 4DAP is a 3-month intensive program that teaches you how to awaken your Kundalini safely and gradually, and how to self-pace the process for maximum success and integration. So if you're having difficulty in your Kundalini awakening and you need help learning how to navigate it, or if you want to learn how to awaken Kundalini the right way, then you can learn more through the link in the description below. But for now, let's get back to some interesting passages in the New Testament that have to do with Jesus' Kundalini awakening. Beginning first with Matthew 3:11, where John the Baptist says of Jesus, "I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire." Interesting verse, isn't it? Jesus will baptize you with fire? You mean like the cleansing fire of love that burns away all spiritual impurities when Kundalini awakens? Sounds like that might be exactly what John the Baptist was implying. Because fire is a Semitic metaphor for purification, used all throughout the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. It is not a metaphor for eternal conscious torment. The fire of truth burns away what is false, like an alchemist's fire. And this burning away hurts, but ultimately purifies. And so in Luke 12:49, Jesus also says, "I came to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled." So here again, Yeshua is using fire as a metaphor for purification. He obviously wasn't saying, "I want to burn the whole world down and kill everybody." He was saying, "I want everyone to go through the same inner purification that I've gone through. I want everyone to be purified by the divine fire of love." This is what Yeshua's mission was. And he said, "How I wish it were already kindled." Kindled where? In the hearts of everyone that followed him. In John 4:14, Yeshua says, "The water that I give will become in you a spring of living water, welling up into everlasting life." And in John 7:38, he says, "Whoever believes in me, out of their heart shall flow rivers of living water." Out of their heart, their green ray energy center, shall flow rivers of living water. Kundalini is also often compared to a river of light that floods through the body. And Jesus said, when you keep your eyes single, which means when you become aware of oneness in your perception, when you see all things as one with God, then your whole body will be flooded with this light. That's the awakening of Kundalini, my friends. Let me tell you, there is no other phenomenon Jesus could possibly be describing here. When you allow love to saturate your awareness, when you keep your eyes single on the love of God, Kundalini awakens, and the whole body becomes flooded with the light of green ray energy, the energy of divine love. In fact, if I had to describe what my inner conjunction experience felt like, I would probably say something like, it felt like my whole body was being flooded with light. Interesting, isn't it? A Course in Miracles also says that the kingdom of heaven is the awareness of perfect oneness. And in Luke 17:21, Yeshua said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So the awareness of perfect oneness is within you. It is your Kundalini green ray energy waiting to come online. The evolutionary purpose of Kundalini is to bring heart-based consciousness into our nervous system and allow us to embody it naturally and effortlessly. Kundalini heralds the next evolutionary leap in human consciousness, the next energy center, which every human being is attempting to activate in this lifetime. A Kundalini awakening is a significant event for the soul because it represents the next evolutionary leap of human consciousness. Those of us living with an awakened heart center are literally heralding the new Earth. We are the forerunners of the fourth density planet that Earth is now becoming. That is the evolutionary purpose of Kundalini, to bring humanity into our next phase of evolution. By doing what? By bringing heart-based consciousness into our nervous system so that we can embody divine love as a living reality rather than just as a concept. We can live as Jesus did in the kingdom of heaven here and now, the awareness of perfect oneness with everything. Jesus clearly walked in this state of awareness, and he tried to call up all his disciples to walk in it alongside him. And that is what made Jesus a true Kundalini master.